is Cars and Bids, and today I'm going to talk about my biggest surprises on Cars and Bids. Not the cars themselves that are surprising, but the money they sold for. I'm going to talk about cars that got more money than I thought they would, the ones that surprised me most as I was watching their auctions end. So let's go. Cars and Bids, the cars that surprised me most with their sale prices. All right, I'm going to start with one that might surprise you, and that would be Tesla. Tesla has been an interesting surprise here on Cars and Bids. We have now sold 7 or 8 of them. 100% of the Teslas that have listed on Cars and Bids have sold. And in my opinion, from what I'm aware of the Tesla market, they have all gotten to their retail price, or in some cases, somewhat above. We talked to the sellers of a few of these cars and they've told us they've been happy with the prices they've sold for, the transactions have completed, they've all sold 100% sale rate with Tesla. Now this surprised me because I wasn't entirely sure that the Cars and Bids demographic would line up with the Tesla demographic. But what I think I've discovered is that people who are interested in Teslas are car people, for one thing, people who want to try something new or interesting or cool, especially as these cars are depreciating, and Tesla buyers tend to be kind of younger buyers who are used to buying cars online or in a digital space, and so they're not really worried about placing big bids for a car online, and they're not particularly nervous or anxious about the concept of buying a car in this manner. And so we've done well with Teslas, to the point where now most Tesla owners, when they submit their cars, they're willing to go no reserve. No reserve auctions tend to bring more money since people know there's no uncertainty in their bidding, they're more exciting. And so people with Teslas, they've seen results from other Tesla models and they're like, yeah, I'll just go no reserve, get maybe an extra 1,000 or 2. And so that's what we've started to get because Tesla people are so confident in their sales. This has been a big surprise to me. Didn't expect the success with Teslas, but it's what we've gotten. Okay, next up, 3 older Euro cars that surprised me. One is this 1995 BMW 850 CSI, the purple one, that listed on Cars and Bids and then sold for $143,000, which is one of the highest prices that any 850 CSI has ever sold for. I wasn't really expecting this car to do so well. It's a low mileage car in a very rare exterior and interior color, but based on other 850 CSI sales, I just didn't think it would happen, but it did, and it makes sense. I mean, you're never going to find another one of these, ever. You'll never find another low mileage, purple one. I think there was one other in existence. So it's a pretty special car. And so of course it went for that much money, but it was still a surprise to me. Now another interesting surprise to me in this same vein, this 1986 Mercedes-Benz 190e 2.316. This was a unique car. This is a one owner 2.316 with 87,000 miles. Tremendously hard to find, but it was an automatic. Now that made it really hard to price because almost all of these are manuals, and you assume that most enthusiasts want a manual. And so this one was submitted, went back and forth on reserve, wasn't really sure where it would go, and then it sold for a lot more than I expected. But at the end of the day, again, it kind of makes sense. This is a low mileage 190 2.316. They're very difficult to find in this sort of condition, manual or automatic. So if you want a nice one, here you go. But it was a surprise in a good way. And next up, another European car, performance luxury sedan surprise in this same vein, this 2000 BMW 740i. And what makes this one special is it was an E39 M5 drivetrain and transmission swap into an E38 740i. One of the coolest swaps of all time. This sold for $18,500, which in my opinion is pretty good money. A regular E38 in this condition, etc., would probably sell for, I don't know, $6,000, maybe $8,000, $9,000. There's some concerns about the reliability of those cars, but with the drivetrain swap, you get a more reliable engine, a more enjoyable, engaging powertrain transmission, but you put it into the most beautiful car. And so when this came in, I didn't even check the reserve. I approved it. And I said, I want this on the site. I at least want to be able to push it out on social media and say, this is the coolest thing in the world. I was really excited. And then it ended up selling, bringing big money because it's just such an unusual and such a cool car. And if someone wants an E39 M5, but they don't want to be like everybody else, or if they want an E38, but they want sort of a more fun, more engaging, maybe more reliable one, here's a chance to get both. I kind of wanted this car, frankly, and I still do. It had a few flaws, but it was all correctable stuff. And if you corrected it, then you would have one of the coolest sedans, I think, that I could imagine. Okay, next up, another big surprise, this 1989 Merkur Scorpio, which sold for $12,500. And yes, that is how you were supposed to say it, Merkur, not Merkur. Basically, the way this brand worked was Ford took some European models and they brought them to the US under the guise of this new brand, Mercure. And the intent was to kind of have a more sophisticated take on Ford models. You had your American Fords, but then you had your Mercures, and this was a luxury vehicle at the time. These days, almost nobody even knows what this car is anymore. There were two Mercure models. There was the XR4 Ti, which was a little bit more exciting, a little bit more sought after now, and then there was this, the Scorpio, which is the sedan version. The cool thing about this car is it was unbelievably nice. Only 19,000 miles, tremendously nice interior, just fantastic car. I have come to know the seller of this car. He sold a bunch of cars on Cars and Bids, all with no reserve. He's a big believer in the site. And he came to me and said, I'm thinking about buying this. And I said, are you crazy? Those aren't popular. You can't buy that. It's like but I was excited. I mean, this is the nicest one of these left, I'm sure. And so he put it on us to see what happens. And what happened was there's actually a lot more interest. And I'm starting to discover that for cars that are kind of the nicest, the lowest mileage, the best, there's always a ton of interest in them. Even if a regular example wouldn't have any interest, there's always someone or several people who want the best. And so this is the best Mercure Scorpio. And I have to say, as a fan of quirky cars, this is one of the coolest cars I think we've run on the site so far. I'm obsessed with it. I probably would have paid $12,000 for it, but I'm glad that someone else out there did too. And I suspect that person will have no trouble reselling it in the future to another enthusiast of weird cars. Now, on a similar vein, here's one that really surprised me. This 1988 Hugo sold for $6,100. Now, that's not a big number, but the surprise here is that it sold for $6,100 in Hugo. This was famous for being the worst, the cheapest, the crappiest car in America when it was being sold new. But over the years, they've developed kind of this cult following, and frankly, I think there's a lot of charm to it. It's funny because Toyotas, Hondas from this era, they're still kind of cool, but they were cars, disposable. This had some charm. It was the worst. It was Eastern European. It was kind of a laughable thing, and now they're becoming desirable if you can find one in nice shape, almost for the irony of the whole thing. Like, yeah, I got the worst car. And so these are really coming up. And so this one sold for $6,100. I wouldn't be entirely surprised if in the next 6 months, a year, we have other Hugos on the site bring even more money. These are becoming surprisingly desirable just for their ridiculousness. And I love that. I think it's cool, but it's surprising. Okay, next up, we absolutely have to talk off-roader SUVs. I have harped on this point in a few of these videos, but it is amazing to me what is happening in the off-roader SUV world right now in terms of values. I think because of COVID, people are trying to just escape, go camping, whatever, since they can't fly or travel like they usually would, and so off-roader SUVs, they're interested. Gas prices are relatively low. Maybe Instagram plays a role with all the cool scenery that you see on your phone. You can go drive to it. Whatever the reason, off-roader SUVs are incredibly hot. On the new market, they really are. You have vehicles like the Ford Bronco Sport, and also the Toyota 4Runner, the Jeep Wrangler, the Gladiator, the Raptor. I mean, G-Wagon, you can name a bunch of these off-roaders very popular, but they've also been really popular on Cars and Bids. And some of them have brought way more than I thought, and I think this trend's gonna continue. Take a look at this 2008 Porsche Cayenne. This is a 6-speed manual Cayenne, and it's got all-terrain tires, and I don't think it had a lift, but it was, you know, roof basket. It had some cool, like, off-roady look to it. This sold for $16,750. These are cool cars, but I did not think it would bring that much money. A little over 100,000 miles. It's the V6 engine, but you know, with some off-road ability, some great photos, like here's what you can do, and here's your chance to have a Cayenne that you take off-road, way cooler than anybody else's off-roader. And so this surprised me, but I have to say, in the world of off-roaders on Cars and Bids, stuff is surprising me less and less. This market's just really hot right now. Another good example, of course, this 2002 BMW X5 is one of my favorite cars we've sold on Cars and Bids. Lifted X5 with off-roader tires, roof basket, manual transmission. This car is really cool. When it came in, again, I approved it without even really looking at the reserve. I said, we gotta have this car. I wanna post it on Facebook and say, look at this thing. And of course it sold because it's crazy and it's really cool. And I'm thrilled that we had that on the site as well. And again, brought good money. Off-roaders are doing the job. Now, in a similar and interesting vein, how about this 2007 Volkswagen Touareg? Not an off-roader build, but the opposite. This one was built out to be a replica of the high-performance Touareg, which is called the R50 that they sold in Europe. They never sold the R50 here, but here's your chance to get one, basically. I mean, it looks just like it. But the cool thing here is this isn't just any Touareg made into an R50 replica. It's a V10 TDI model. So the craziest engine ever installed in a mid-size luxury SUV SUV in human history was this V10 turbo diesel that Volkswagen put in the Touareg. And here's your chance to have not only that cool engine, but it's, you know, a R50 replica. It looks neat. This one sold for $13,300. I think it surprised the seller more than me. By the time this thing listed, it was only a couple of weeks ago, I've already started to realize special SUVs are going to bring money on Cars and Bids. We have the clientele. I'm really into them. I promote the hell out of them. I think they're cool. And so they've brought big money. And this one, not really that surprising, but surprising in the sense that, you know, here's kind of an aging used SUV. It's made cooler and it brings real money. And that's neat. I think that the off-roader SUV, the special SUV, bring them on. Give us your Saleen XP8s and your Dodge Durango SP360s and your Typhoons. We are the place to sell cool and special SUVs, and I think these few are proof, and there's others too. Now, finally, my very favorite cars that brought a lot more money than we expected. This 2005 Winnebago Adventurer, this one comes in. It was an NBC broadcast control room. And I guess it was like an emergency command room for the Golden Globes. So if like power went out or something, they could operate stuff from this van. They would park it outside. The whole thing is ridiculous. This car came in, it caused a little controversy on our staff. Not everybody wanted to list an RV, but I said, look, this is weird and cool and it will sell and it is exciting. And it brought $14,200, which is decent money for this thing. And it has a way cooler story than any other RV. So a bit of a surprise that we sold it, that we took it at all, that we sold it. And I think we got a pretty good number for it. It was certainly a very interesting vehicle. Next up, in the same vein of weird stuff that we weren't really sure, should we take this? Then we did, and it got good money. This 1995 Renaissance Tropica. This was an electric car that we sold. I'd never heard of it when it came in. The seller wanted to sell it no reserve, so we did. I thought it would bring $3,000–4,000, and ended up bringing $11,500. I have no idea if that's high or low. I don't know if there's a market for Renaissance Tropicas. But it sold, and there were almost 30 bids on it. Obviously, hundreds of comments. Everybody thought it was just as interesting as me. I'm curious what happens to it next if someone puts a gas engine in it. I think it's a pretty good looking car. But either way, certainly a weird one, and it certainly brought more money than I thought. But then again, I'm clueless. I have no idea what the market is on these Renaissance Tropicas. And finally, the last car that brought more money than I thought, undoubtedly, this 1986 Pontiac Fiero, rebadged, rebodied Ferrari Enzo, the worst replica car creation in the history of time, was sold here. The Car Bros on YouTube, they have this car that they've done these amazing videos with, and they even entered it in the Quail at Pebble Beach, like the most prestigious event. And this is just the stupidest car in the world. And someone paid $5,000 for it. When we got the first bid for this car, it was like $100. And I assumed, honestly, that was it. I was terrified when we listed this that no one would bid on it. But in the end, it got to $5,000. And I have to say, the weird factor of it is huge. You can take this to any car event in the country and people will know it from those videos. It's a very special, very bizarre vehicle. I'm thrilled we listed it, but I'm also thrilled it got to an actual number, a respectable figure that sold for $5,000. Probably the strangest car we have ever sold on Cars and Bids. And I actually got some flack from people for selling this, for offering it. People said, oh, that's a joke car. You shouldn't have stuff. It's not gonna, your website doesn't seem serious with that car. But you know, it was featured on Jay Leno's Garage. And my view is, if it's good enough for Jay Leno's Garage, it is good enough for Cars and Bids. And we got $5,000 for it. So that was a little cherry on top. So those are my biggest surprise cars so far. The cars that have sold for the most money that have surprised me. We got some Euro performance cars, special ones, they bring big money. Teslas bring more money than I ever thought and sell at a higher rate than I expected. And then off-roader and sort of special SUVs. Those are the three like surprise me segments that we've done really well with. Obviously we've done well with S2000s, M5s, Land Cruisers, but I expected that. What I didn't expect was this sheer number of off-roader SUVs to sort of take off and do so well. And then also just some weird cars in general that surprised me. But those are the cars that have surprised me the most on Cars and Bids. And of course, log on to Cars and Bids and check out all of the cool cars we have for auction right now. And a quick note, we have no auctions ending on Thursday, which of course is Thanksgiving, no surprise. But we will resume normal operations on Friday with all sorts of cool and weird and interesting and quirky cars selling and listing for sale. So thanks for watching Cars and Bids.